Mali and Ukraine do not seem like natural partners for a diplomatic spat. Their capitals are 5,500 kilometers apart. Neither country has a substantial diaspora community in the other. There is no little Ukraine in Bamako, nor a Mali town in Kiev. There is no historical context that could incite resentment in either direction. The Ukrainians did not colonize West Africa. Malian legions never rushed the gates of Donetsk. Trade between them is derisory. In the last year, for which figures could be located, Ukraine exported to Mali a mere $28 million worth of stuff. It should really be perfectly possible for Mali and Ukraine to go generally about their business with each regarding the other, when they regard them at all, with a sort of benign indifference, like New Zealand might with Kyrgyzstan or Japan with Paraguay. And yet, Mali has this week escalated swiftly through the settings of the diplomatic spat, bypassing the harumphing cable to the other capital and the summoning of the ambassador to a meeting with no biscuits, to the full-scale severing of diplomatic relations. In fairness to Mali, they didn't really have the option of summoning Ukraine's ambassador, as Ukraine doesn't have an embassy in Mali. The nearest Ukrainian embassy is in Senegal. There isn't a Malian embassy in Ukraine either. Nevertheless, the deed is done. As far as Mali is concerned, it and Ukraine are officially on non-speakers. At issue is a battle that occurred last week near Tinzoaten, along Mali's northeastern border with Algeria. On one side of the Stauch were Malian troops and their auxiliaries from Wagner Group, the Russian mercenary outfit best known for hideous behaviour in a variety of conflicts and for staging an abortive mutiny in Russia in June 2023, shortly after which Wagner Group's founder, the former Leningrad hot dog cart operative Yevgeny Prigozhin, may have been the only person on Earth surprised by what happened when he chose to take an internal flight in Russia on a private aircraft.
Wagner mercenary group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin has died after a business jet he was on crashed about 100 miles northwest of Moscow.
On the other side of this fracas were a coalition of Tuareg separatists and Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, the local Al-Qaeda franchise. Judging by well-sourced reports and extremely grisly videos, it was the Tuaregs and the Islamists who had the best of it. Dozens of Malian soldiers and Wagner Group paramilitaries were shown dead in the dust, the vehicles they had been travelling in burned and/or wrecked. The passing listener may well be wondering round about now what a punch-up in a West African desert involving Malian soldiers, Russian mercenaries, Tuareg rebels and black flag-waving headbangers has to do with Ukraine, which you'd reckon has more than enough to be concerned with at home, what with seeking to defend itself from its acquisitive neighbour, which despite being the biggest country in the world, like nearly twice the size of the second biggest, is willing to plough a generation of its young men into someone else's sunflower fields in the hope of being a bit bigger. However, shortly after Mali's army and Wagner Group steered into the ambush at Tinzoaten, one Andrei Yusov, a spokesperson for Ukraine's military intelligence service, the GUR, said, quote, "The rebels received necessary information, and not just information, which enabled a successful military operation against Russian war criminals." There are a couple of possible explanations for this. One is that Ukraine had absolutely nothing to do with it, and that Yusov and the GUR have merely grasped an opportunity to wind everyone up a bit. Similar mischief may also have animated Ukraine's ambassador in Senegal, who posted support for the attack on the embassy's social media pages, and who was summoned by Senegalese authorities for his impertinence. It is unclear as of this recording whether biscuits were offered. Niger, clearly not wishing to miss out on the fun, has also cut diplomatic relations with Ukraine, a blow from which Ukraine is expected to recover reasonably quickly. The other explanation is that Ukraine did have something to do with it. This certainly is the view that Mali has taken, government spokesperson Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga thunderously damning, quote, Ukraine's involvement in a cowardly, treacherous and barbaric attack by armed terrorist groups.
Lâche, traître et barbare des groupes armés terroristes.
But how likely is that, really? Ukraine denies it, and no actual evidence beyond the ambiguous statements of the two Ukrainian officials has been advanced by any of Ukraine's accusers. Much of the outrage appears to have been incited by a photograph apparently showing victorious Tuaregs brandishing a Ukrainian flag, an image subsequently debunked for all the difference a debunking ever makes these days. However, it has been plausibly reported that Ukrainian special forces have been active in Sudan, also joining the side Wagner Group are not on. In this instance, the Sudanese army fighting against the rebels Wagner is assisting. It is definitely the case that President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine met the chief of Sudan's army, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, when both were in Ireland last September. And from Ukraine's perspective, there would be a logic to any such endeavour. Wagner Group is a Russian asset, as are the Russian relationships in Africa that Wagner Group is protecting. If Ukraine sees a chance to degrade the former and diminish the latter, it would seem daft not to take it. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Mueller.